Francis had signed a development deal with Warner Brothers. So the first film that Zoetrope produced under this agreement was THX 1138, which George had made at film school at USC. The challenge was to take a student film, which was 20 minutes long, and expand it into a feature with a story that had a beginning, middle, and an end, and yet had something of that crazy futuristic vision that THX had.
The truth of it is, I was very involved in non-linear filmmaking and non-story, character-driven scenarios, and I felt this was a chance to sort of push the envelope, to do the kinds of films that I had been doing in film school and do it on a grander scale.
We kept saying that this is not a film about the future, it's a film from the future. So there are things in the film that are mysterious that we don't bother to explain because in the future everyone would understand this. But, you know, it still has a car chase, it still has a romance, has an escape.
When I made THX, I knew it was going to be controversial in terms of what the studio wanted. They gave me the chance to make the movie. They didn't really understand it. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, and I even said to Francis, I said, I'm never going to get a chance to make a movie like this again. I'm really going to go all the way with this, and if it destroys my career, I guess that's what's going to happen, but I'll never get this shot again. So I took it.
As soon as the film came out, as soon as the film was released, it was released around the same time as American Graffiti and George Lucas's picture. And of course our picture, a few weeks later, went into the ground, you know, buried forever to a certain extent, except that, you know, then it came out on television and things like that. People still stop me in the street about it. But American Graffiti it was the overall across the board, a real American memory, nostalgic piece.
American Graffiti van George Lucas werd tot ieders verbazing een enorm succes. Kosten nog geen miljoen en opbrengst meer dan $55 miljoen.
Anytime a film comes along that is different, there is a risk. The risk is nobody's going to get it, or the other risk, which is the good side, is the studio is kind of behind the curve, and this film is in advance of the curve. They're where the audience is, and there's a surprise. Well, I think that's what happened with Graffiti. The audience was more ready for the film than Universal in 1973 thought they were.
It was an exercise in learning the craft of storytelling and the craft of character development. But even then, I pushed the envelope very far, and it was so far out that the studios, again, didn't like it. They didn't want to do it. They said, this is just a musical montage, doesn't mean anything. But it was as straight and as conservative as I could get at that time.
When you read the script of Graffiti, at the top of every scene was the usual things, exterior parking lot, Mel's, but then there would be the name of the song that George was playing when he wrote the scene. The problem was that this was for every scene in the film, which is 45 scenes, which meant 45 songs. Up to that point, no film had ever contemplated anything like that. We developed something for sound that photography has always had, which is depth of field, meaning there are things in the front that are well lit and in focus, and there are things in the background that are less well lit and out of focus.
We knew we had to approach it in a semi-documentary style. So, for instance, at places like Mel's Drive-In, what we really did was go around and change the light bulbs into photo floods and replace the neon with new neon. It had, most of the neon had gone. And that was really the lighting style, with a little bit of movie lighting kind of thrown in where necessary to boost it up. But 80% of the lighting was real. Inside the cars, we used slight booster lighting of minimal kind to bring it up slightly above the ambient light.
I was basically a documentary filmmaker from the streets. American Graffiti was kind of a documentary film in a dramatic context. I was actually in film school in the 60s, and in 1965, 1966, it was the beginning of all of the youth movements that were going on around the world, and the film departments were no different. We felt that we were going to take over the world, that we were going to make real change, and that things were going to be different from the way they were.
I think what happened sort of in the mid-60s was the decline of the major studios, the rise of the independent filmmaker, and a sort of change in the intellectual attitude of college students in America especially, that those students that always wanted to write the great American novel changed into those that wanted to make the great American movie.
I made Star Wars. It was a very difficult film to make. There was a lot of problems involved. There was very little money, very little time. I finished it. I showed it to my friends. They said, "Oh, gee, George, I really feel sorry for you. This is too bad. Better luck next time." And then it became an even bigger hit. But I had absolutely no idea that it was going to be a blockbuster.
I have you now. What?
It opened a year after the end of the Vietnam War, and I think the country had gone through such a trauma of being divided, the left against the right, the pro-war and anti-war, had been at each other's throats for so many years and with such bitterness that everyone was looking for an opportunity to find something they could share in common and feel good about and unite around. George told me that what I'm really making here is sort of like a Disney movie. So he said, Disney films always make $16 million. You could look at every picture they've ever released, they make $16 million. This picture is costing around 10. So there's no way we're going to break even on the film. He says, but I think that with the merchandising of products related to the film, we may be able to break even.
Star Wars, for the first time, brought in the concept of that a film represented a franchise, that every movie could be sold in all of its little parts. There were products. There was product placement. Every movie became an industry unto itself. That was something that no one envisioned, say, in 19...